Thank you for coming. And so maybe we'll get started. This is the Southeast Asia regional session. So if it's not the intended session, we have a parallel regional sessions right now. So this is for the Southeast Asia, just to make sure you're in the right room for your own interest. We have a topic of driving energy transition and decarbonization in Southeast Asia today. And for this, we have a very good panel of experts. But I have pretty much left what I wanted to say in intro to my director Keisu's opening remarks. So I'll go ahead and ask Keiju to come up and start the session. Please welcome Keiju Mitsuhashi, Director of Southeast Asia and Pacific in ADB's Energy Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your being here. It's an exciting time to be talking about the energy transition. The focus is on Southeast Asia, and this is an exciting area. The theme of the, this Asia Clean Energy Forum this year is a time for urgent action now. We have seen important progress in Southeast Asia already, but there is much more that can be done and that need to be done to accelerate energy transition. This session's title is Driving Energy Transition and Decarbonizing the Southeast Asia. And we have a distinguished group of panelists for this topic today. We have requested the panelists in this session to share success cases of energy transition initiatives so that the key enabling element can be shared and replicated in the region. We first have a panelist from the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy of the Ministry of Economy, Industry, Trade in Japan, Mr. Umeda, along with Japan's Kawasaki Heavy Industry, Mr. Ozawa. Yuki, do you want the panelists to come in as I say, or? Yeah?
I think, yeah.
Okay, so I will introduce everyone first and then I will invite them. Yeah, all right, yeah. So let me continue the introduction of the panelists. Next, Mr. Dania Aquilio from the Philippines, and then we'll discuss Meralco's experience in its way forward on energy transition. Our colleagues Claire from the Private Sector Operations Department will then discuss highlights of the ADB's private sector financing project in Southeast Asia. Mr. Tanachai from Thailand's EGAT is the Chief of Renewable Energy Focus Center, and he will be discussing EGAT's experience with demand response and how renewable energy forecasting became necessary in the energy transition. Finally, Mr. Sharad Desumani, the head of Infrastructure Advisory Group from the KPMG Singapore, will discuss what he has seen as the key element of energy transition in the region. Okay, with this, I'll give floor back to the MC, Yuki.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and invite the representatives from Japan. This is a kind of a unique session. It will be done by two panelists in a way together, but back to back, coming from the perspective in Japan. First, please, Mr. Umeda for his presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Umeda. I am Director for International Policy on Carbon Neutrality of Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. And today I will briefly explain Japan's activities towards carbon clean energy transitions. So, firstly, let's look at Japan's trends of CO2 emissions. Japan has declared 2050 carbon neutrality, and CO2 emission reductions are currently on track. This is a result of complex reason. One of the reason is thorough energy conservation. But anyway, further efforts are needed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And in the February of 2023, Japanese government announced a basic policy for realization of green transformation, and relevant bills passed the Diet session in May last year. Based on this law, we have set a goal of public and private investments more than 150 trillion yen. It's equivalent to 1 trillion US dollars over the next 10 years to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. To this purpose, Japanese government issued 20 trillion yen for the investment. And to pay this, to finance this money, Japanese government issued first climate transition bonds. And also it is, I think innovation is the key to energy transition, and Japan is also taking steps in the area of R&D. For example, in the field of offshore wind power, Japan is developing and implementing technology for floating offshore wind that meet the characteristics of the Asian market, especially meteorological conditions such as typhoons, lightning, and marine conditions like swells. For the solar PV, we are developing next generation photovoltaic technology such as perovskite solar cells, which are flexible and can be installed on building's wall. And one thing, and it's important thing is that for the decarbonization of thermal power generation itself, and in Asia, many countries, including Japan, still rely heavily on fossil fuel power. And in addition, the use of natural gas as a transition energy source remains important. So many of these thermal power plants have not been fully depreciated, making early retirement difficult. In addition, thermal power generation is necessary to stabilize the grid in order for the mass introduction of renewable energy. And thermal power, turbines of thermal power plants works to stabilize frequency in response to momentary frequency fluctuation. So this inertial force plays an important role in stability of the grid. So it is important not only to retire thermal power generation as early as possible, but also to use it to stabilize the grid for the mass introduction of VRE. Therefore, from the perspective of decarbonizing thermal power, hydrogen and ammonia co-firing and CCUS technology are also being developed. And in order to share our experience and thoughts with Asian countries, Japan launched the Asia Zero Emission Community, AZEC. In January 2022, Prime Minister Kishida announced the concept, and based on his concept, the first ministerial meeting was held in March 2023. Also in December 2023, the first AZEC leaders meeting was held back-to-back with Japan ASEAN special leaders meeting. At the leaders meeting, AZEC principles, AZEC principle is, has two, and one is a triple breakthrough, and one is one goal various pathways. So these principles were shared and agreed to shared. And also at the leaders meeting, leaders agreed to establish Asia Zero Emission Center for their policy coordination. Also, ASEAN BAC, Keidanren, and AREA agreed to launch ASEC advocacy group for public-private cooperation. And in addition, over 350 cooperation projects were highlighted in the progress report in the ASEC leaders meeting. And this slide showed is a breakdown of the over 350 cooperative projects listed in the progress report. And through these projects, substantial projects, Japan hopes to contribute to decarbonization in Asian countries. And this is my end of my presentation. And after my presentation, Mr. From the Kawasaki Heavy Industry presented his technologies. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jimmy Ozawa from Kawasaki Heavy Industries, Japan. Firstly, it is a great honor to be here today, but I'm afraid time is very limited. So today I'd like to talk about only one important point called creation between ASEAN and Japan. Okay, please take a look at this picture. This picture includes everything what I'd like to talk today. So does anyone know what kind of facility are they? Okay, let me introduce. On the right side of this picture, we can see some white capsule. This is rifle. This rifle made in the Philippines and designed in the US. And the middle of this picture, in the right side, we can see some one gray boxes. This box is inverter with IBSG control. We manufacture this box in Kyoto, in Japan. And the other gray box is electrical facilities. This made in the Philippines. In my opinion, we can call this as a Japan-Philippines co-creation system. And this is the outline for our system. This system can consist of grid-forming inverters, batteries, engines, and renewables. And this system makes it possible to deploy more renewables. And while keeping the grid frequency stable and reduce fuel consumption by using excess power from PV solar array. Anyway, I'm not here to have some technical introduction today. So after this session, please give me your email address so I can send some details by email. Anyway, so let's go back to the main track. I took the picture just 1 month ago in Russell University in Laguna. Russell University is one of the best universities in this country. And right now we are working together with Japan, Philippines, and the company in the US as international working team among 3 countries. And the purpose of this working team is carbon neutrality. The point, what I want to say is why we are working with such partners in this country, I mean, outside of Japan. The reason for that is co-creation. Okay, so please take a look at this bar chart. This is the energy mix of ASEAN countries. And as you can see, each energy mix really diversity. We Japanese are good at R&D, and by doing so, a wide range of decarbonization technology has been accumulated by taking much time. But energy and environmental restrictions in ASEAN countries vary from country to country beyond our expectations. And exporting Japanese solution does not work. And we need to find the way to learn more about actual situation, actual requirement. So I think ASEAN and the Japan co-creation is essential to modify such Japanese solutions to meet global requirements. And when we think of the way to carbon neutrality, most of us see European advanced cases as a good example. But we also need to know that there are some big differences between Asia and Europe. I'm in charge of business development from Kawasaki Industry. And when I try to make some proposal about decarbonization to my client, sometimes I facing some four kind of big difference like this. And by facing these four big differences, I learned that the typical advanced example is not realistic to Asia. So I think co-creation is the only way to make our approach more realistic. And this can be a pathway to create new decarbonization market in Asia. So that is why I trust that we Japanese company need partners in ASEAN for our own future. Okay, this is the last page. In closing, I'd like to emphasize the importance of co-creation once again. Huge amount of renewable energy must be deployed until 2030, 2050, and to achieve our decarbonization target. And on the other hand, we need to achieve economical growth to tackle poverty problem. In ASEAN countries, some of countries is facing poverty problem. So in my opinion, this is also urgent issue for all of us. So realistic solutions are required, and I would like to work with you, country in ASEAN, so we both can reach our goals. So looking forward to work with ASEAN countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Umeda. Thank you, Mr. Ozawa. Interesting to hear about some of the applications in Japan and this concept of co-creating new technology rather than bringing them in, like I think we have seen in the past. I have some questions, but I'll leave them to the end where we will have a Q&A session. So please take note of the questions you might have. There will be an opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. So next, I'd like to invite Mr. Dani Aquilo from Meralco.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having us here. Today, I'll share with you briefly the remarkable journey of Meralco in navigating the dynamic landscape of clean energy transition. As we delved into the key insights, lessons learned, and future initiatives, we will explore how our commitment to sustainability has not only shaped our business practices, but also positioned us as a catalyst for change in the realm of environmental stewardship. We in Meralco envision a brighter tomorrow for everyone. We aim to be responsive to the call of the times, to meet the changing needs of our customers. Our portfolio of businesses continuously evolves. Aside from distributing power, we also constantly explore avenues to improve our services and drive economic and societal progress. We continue to better our best with the help of our subsidiaries, affiliates, and other business units. Meralco is the premier and largest electricity distribution utility in the Philippines, delivering power to Metro Manila and its adjacent provinces. Headquartered in Pasig City, Meralco's coverage spans about 9,700 square kilometers, energizing over about 8 million households and 580,000 businesses, which collectively account for more than half of the country's gross domestic product, or GDP. We do not just provide the light to homes, we light the path to progress. At Meralco, we are dedicated to a sustainable future focused on customer centricity, innovation, and sustainability. Our purpose is tagapaghatid ng liwanag, or bearers of hope, which drives positive change in communities that we serve. We invest in modernizing infrastructure, expanding renewable energy, and enhancing efficiency. Our initiatives empower customers with smart technology for cost savings and reliability. Committed to deep decarbonization, we aim for sustainability leadership in the energy sector by 2050. Meralco provides affordable and clean energy, powering cities sustainably and promoting prosperity for all, which is the hallmark of our sustainability agenda, which is powering the good life. Now, the country is embracing renewable energy in alignment with the Department of Energy's 2020 to 2040 National Renewable Energy Program and the Philippine Energy Plan. The target is to achieve 35% renewable energy share by 2030 and increase it to 50% by 2040. In addition, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, or RA 11285, promotes efficient energy usage and offers incentives for projects. These laws drive renewable energy adoption and encourage innovations for energy efficiency within the group's franchise areas. Aligned with this, distribution utilities must procure electricity through competitive bidding to comply with the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or RPS. The RPS, which is now at 2.52%, mandates share of energy from renewable sources. Now, the laws and regulations govern Meralco's operations in energy exploration, development, utilization, distribution, and conservation, aligning with both local mandates and global decarbonization goals under the Paris Agreement. One Meralco is actively transforming into a sustainable enterprise in response to the global shift to clean and renewable energy. Anchored on our long-term sustainability strategy, or LTSS, the group will drive its just, orderly, and affordable transition to clean energy with the goal of becoming coal-free by 2050. This strategy outlines the transition to renewable energy, adoption of next-generation clean tech, and deep decarbonization across three horizons. Horizon 1, that's for the period 2021 to 2030, we aim to initiate a low-carbon transition to serve the country's growing energy demand with greener power. For Horizon 2, or from 2031 to 40, we would accelerate the green energy shift through the adoption of next-generation clean tech. In Horizon 2, The group will evaluate emerging cleaner innovations that are expected to mature technologically and economically beginning 2030. Horizon 3, or from 2041 to 50, we would drive deep decarbonization and achieve sustainability leadership in the energy sector through various strategies and solutions. In the decades ahead, the LTSS will continue to serve as a guide for One Meralco, empowering the good life for all of our stakeholders. Now, under Horizon 1, One Meralco has made twin commitments to contract 1,500 megawatts of RE supply and to build 1,500 megawatts of attributable RE capacity through 2030. By the end of 2023, the distribution utility, including our retail electricity supplier, which is Empower, had signed an RE power supply agreement amounting to 1,880 megawatts, while MGen, our power power generator, our subsidiary in power generation, its RE pipeline had a total attributable capacity of 1,442 megawatts. Now, we engage customers at various stages with a three-pronged communication strategy: enlighten with information, empower with actionable options, and energize with renewable energy and innovative solutions. These efforts provide customers with knowledge to make informed energy decisions, guiding them towards an elevated lifestyle or a thriving business. As mentioned, our vision focuses on low carbon transition to meet the country's energy demand sustainably, aiming for sustainability leadership and coal-free future by 2050. Meralco currently has approximately 530 megawatts of embedded renewable energy capacity in its franchise area. In November 2023, Meralco signed a cooperative agreement with US-based Ultrasafe Nuclear Corporation for a pre-feasibility study on micro-modular reactor deployment in the Philippines. With a, Now, in terms of solutions, we facilitate the interconnection of net metering, renewable energy or distributed energy resources, or DER, for both exporting and zero export, as we advocate for the adoption of clean and renewable energy solutions with optimal customer experience. Now, in conclusion, we are dedicated to a sustainable future, leveraging our experience to drive positive change and prosperity in a clearer, cleaner and greener and more sustainable energy future. Our commitment aims to create a better and brighter life for all of our stakeholders. Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Danny. As a resident here in Manila myself, very interesting to hear about Meralco's view. Next, I'd like to invite our own Private Sector Operations Department team member, Claire Alembic, to the stage. Thank you.
So, hello everybody. I'm Claire Alembic. I'm part of the Private Sector Operations Department of the Asian Development Bank. And today I want to talk about a success story. The success story is Vietnam and what we have done there in the past few years. So for me, it's a very inspiring story, what happened in Vietnam, because if you look at the numbers, back in 2019, the total installed capacity of renewable energy projects was very low in Vietnam. Solar projects were about 135 megawatts, and wind power projects were about 197 megawatts. But Vietnam is a very dynamic country with almost 100 million inhabitants, and it has a GDP growth of 6 to 7% per year. And that results in a dramatic rise in the energy demand, and so in greenhouse gas emissions. So the government of Vietnam came up with a very ambitious plan to tackle this. And back in 2015, they announced the first ever national development strategy for renewable energy. And this laid the ground for future policies and reforms. So what happened is that there has been a policy shift. They've decided to go from a heavily reliant on coal power mix to a mix to including about 32% of renewables in total in their power generation by 2030. This is very ambitious. In 2017, they issued a support mechanism and a new PPA for the development of solar power projects in Vietnam. And this was amongst various other policies, but I'm just going to focus on this one because that's quite interesting. So the main driver of growth was actually linked to the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff was 9.35 US dollar cents. So it's quite high for the region. And this, as such, attracted a lot of sponsors and interest from the market. There were also a lot of other benefits, including import duty exemption, low corporate tax, land use charge, and rent exemption as well. And the most interesting is also the tariff was indexed to the VND USD, was indexed to VND, the VND tariff, sorry, was indexed to USD. So there could be some offshore USD financing for this type of projects. So we went from this number that you see on the slide to, at the end of 2022, installed clean power capacity at 20 gigawatts. I repeat, 20 gigawatts. So as a result, Vietnam reached its 2025 targets 5 years earlier than expected. And the country became one of the world's top 10 solar power markets. So I want to focus now on what we have done as ADB in this country. So since the policy has changed, we have also worked with private sector to finance their projects in Vietnam. So since 2018, we have financed 8 projects in the power sector in Vietnam, ranging from rooftop solar to solar farm plants, floating solar, onshore wind, and also a very interesting cross-border project between Laos and Vietnam. We have mobilized around 1.4 billion of private sector financing for these projects. So I don't know if the audience is very familiar with how we finance this kind of projects for the private sector. But basically, you can go from a range of full recourse financing to limited recourse financing and non-recourse. We have tried to do all this type of structure to address the key risk of the market. And I want to present you with 2 deals today, two case studies. The first one is our first project that we've closed in Vietnam. It's with a sponsor from Thailand called Gulf. So Gulf is one of the biggest energy company in Thailand, and they invested in Vietnam back in 2019. And it was a 50 megawatt PV plant, 50 kilometers from Ho Chi Minh, and they had the PPA of 20 years with EVN and the tariff of 9.35 cents. What I should mention is that in that PPA that was developed in 2017, there were bankability issues. The first one was linked to termination and change in law, meaning that the government of Vietnam could from one day to the other say, okay, I'm going to change the tariff from 9.35 cents to 7 cents. So that's a key risk for a company that depends on the cash flow to repay its debt. The second main risk was curtailment. So what happened is that you had a massive increase in solar capacity in the country back in 2019 and 20, and this affected the power system's operations significantly in the country. So they didn't have enough time, and they were not responsive enough maybe as well, because they didn't anticipate so much move on the market to build new transmission lines. And as such, the national grid was overloaded. And what happened is that they had to curtail some projects. Curtailment means that they cannot take extra load from certain projects. So they're just saying to developers, sorry, my grid is overloaded right now. I can't take your electricity. and I'm not going to pay for that. So that's also a risk for the developers. So we addressed that, and we came up with a specific sponsor support to address these two bankability issues. I won't go into the technicals, but if you want, we can discuss after this. Another project that I want to discuss, and it's a really cool project. I'm sure you've heard of it in the news because it's a flagship project for ADB. It's a monsoon power project. So this project is a cross-border project between Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. It's a 600 megawatt wind power project. And what's interesting is there was an MOU signed between the government of Laos and Vietnam, because Laos is the battery of Southeast Asia. Laos only has about 8 million inhabitants, and it has a lot of resources: hydropower resources, solar resources, wind resources. And they are very keen to export to their neighboring countries, including Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And they've signed back in 2015 a first MOU with Vietnam, with an agreement to sell about 3 gigawatts of projects to Vietnam. So there is a high demand in Vietnam, so it makes sense for them to buy from their neighboring country as well. So this project, of course, had, they had to work with the government of Laos to get a concession agreement because the project is located in Laos. And then they have a power purchase agreement with EVN, the utility in Vietnam, to purchase the electricity generated by that project. So the project company is responsible to build the wind farm and the transmission line up to the Vietnamese border. And then from the Vietnamese border, the Vietnamese utilities in charge of building the substation on the transmission line within Vietnam. And there are some mechanisms in the PPA to protect the project company in case EVN transmission line is delayed. Because of course they rely on this transmission line to actually bring the electricity up to Vietnam. So it's a very cool project. 133 turbines in a very remote area. It was not very easy actually to bring the turbines there. And it's also a good ENS project. A lot of, they went up to our ENS standards. They have a community development fund. And it's very positive for Laos. Laos is quite a poor country, and they get royalties and tax from this kind of project. So I just want to conclude, because my time is over, I think, that right now we saw that the trajectory of renewables in Vietnam has been rather impressive. In just a few years, their portfolio of renewable has grown tremendously. However, right now there are once again regulatory uncertainties in the countries, and this is blocking progress of new projects. So you may have heard that there is a new PDP-8 implementation plan that was announced in Vietnam in April. And they have some projects. They have allocated a number of projects for renewables per provinces, and then the province will be in charge to allocate the projects to the sponsor. They have a new PPA with the tariff might not be indexed to USD. The tariff is actually not known yet. It will be disclosed toward the end of the year. We heard that the ministry, MOIT, is working on it. So there are a lot of uncertainties. And when you talk to developers in the country now, they're in a wait-and-see mode. So I think what this case shows is the interlinkage between the policies and how the private sector reacts to it, and how things can change very quickly. So in that sense, I think that's a good case study for other countries in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Very interesting and impressive to see the rapid growth and some of our own ADB's footprints there too. But it also sounds ironic to see some of the issues coming from this rapid growth as well. Some of the sources of my questions later. That said, we'll move on now to Mr. Thanachai Limpaswan from IGAT in Thailand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Well, welcome to my presentation, which is about the Thailand contribution to the clean power. So today I talk about what we did, what we are doing, and what we can do in the future to support the energy transition. But let me start with the policies first, okay? This is a national energy plan with focus on the electricity, natural gas, oil, renewable energy, and energy conservation. Say, as you get, we will focus on electricity and renewable energy. Okay. The next policy is the Thailand Smart Grid Master Plan. This plan have 5 pillars, consists of demand response, renewable energy forecast, microgrid, energy storage system, and electric vehicle integration. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some success story concerning these 2 pillars, the demand response control center and the renewable energy control forecast center. Okay. First, let's start with the demand response control center. Demand response provide the controllability to the system operator, so they can have control over the consumption. So now the system operator can control the generators and can also control the consumption. So they have more options for system control operation. They can use this option to perform the system control operation during emergency. Maybe they can use for the manage the RE fluctuation. Also can use for peak shifting, and maybe they can use it to delay the construction of new power plants, okay, especially the peak power plants. We started the implementation in 2018. Okay, in that time we need to cooperate with the distribution company because they have the consumption or the load connect to this distribution company. So at first the distribution company will act like a load aggregator. So they aggregate the loads, and then the system operator order the DRCC, and DRCC cooperate with the aggregator, and then the aggregator will, reduce the consumption of their customer. Okay. So finally, in 2023, we finally establish the DRCC control center. And ever since we have a lot of visitors, including, both domestic and international. Okay. Next, let's talk about the Renewable Energy Forecast Center, or REFC. Okay. I think we all know that solar and wind energy produce electricity, but they don't give off carbon dioxide, but it gives fluctuation and instability to the power system. So we need to forecast the output of the wind and solar farm so we can manage the fluctuation. We have 2 kind of forecasts. We have day ahead, we use this kind of forecast for short-term generation planning. And we look for like a 10-day horizon with the 30-minute time resolution. The second form of forecast is intraday forecast. This forecast is like we forecast every hour, and the horizon is 6 hours ahead. And we use it for system operator to manage the fluctuation of the RE on the real-time basis. Okay. We start the construction in 2017, and finally in 2023 we complete this project. Okay, and we can forecast up to about 2,000 megawatt of the renewable energy. Solar farm and wind farms. Okay, and also we get a lot of visitors after we complete the project. And these are some other success stories from other division in the ICAT. We have the solar floating solar, and it's built at the Sirinchon Dam in Bunrajthani, capacity of 45 megawatt. We also have grid scale battery installed at 2 substations in Chai Badan and Manut Narong. Both of the substations is in the northeastern area. It's where a lot of wind energy. Okay, we have we have big projects, and big projects usually come with big problems. Okay, the problem is that we focus so much on the technical detail, technical construction, technical implementation. What we tend to forget something that is the grid code. Okay, so the problem is that we have very new and high-tech grid, but the grid code is so old. It doesn't support much of the new technology. So let me give you some example that we have. It's a small issue, but can give big problem. Because when we first implement the RE forecaster, we need data because we need to build a model to forecast. But the grid code doesn't require the wind farm, solar farm to provide the data to us. So when they ask them for the data, they kind of hesitate to give it because they have no obligation to give it. So for time, on that time, we have to go to talk to them and try to make them understand that we need to do the eye forecast to make them understand. And finally, they give us the data so we can start to work with. But they only give us the historical data, but it's enough to make the model. In the future, in the grid code, we'll say that they will have to send the data in real-time basis, especially the weather data on their plants. So, I mean, the lesson learned here is you don't get carried away by just the technical. You have to look at the code integration also. Okay, next, I talk about what we're going to do in the future. In the near future, we want to upgrade the DRCC, the Demand Response Control Center, to be VPPCC, the Virtual Power Plant Control Center. This way, the system operator can not only control the consumption, but they can control the distributed energy resources also. We have a lot of the most small generation over the country, which system operator cannot see. But with this virtual power plant platform, system operator can observe the generation of this very, very small generation and give them some control over that generation. Okay, next we will have to improve our RE forecast center. We have to expand our forecast. We're going to have a lot more RE plant, wind farm, solar farm coming in. We also need to improve our accuracy. So we will develop an ensemble forecast system. And as a lot of RE coming in, we have to narrow down the horizon. Instead of looking for every 15 minutes now, we have to look shorter than that, maybe 3 or 5 or 10 minutes. That way we can control better. And to do that, we need some kind of, the sky camera image and to use AI to track down the cloud and determine the output of the plant. Also, we need to forecast the EV charging load as well, because in Thailand, the number of EV growing rapidly. And we want to make sure that we have enough electricity for them to charge and without any constraint to the system. And also, this is the starting point to implement the V2G in the future. And finally, of course, we need to upgrade the grid code to support all the new technology. Okay, we got to have more detail in the grid code about renewable energy, especially wind farms and solar farms. Also, we need to have some code about distributed energy resources, because a lot of them can be a problem if we cannot control it. Also, we need to have some cybersecurity in the grid code. Also, we need to have some code about the energy storage system and the smart grid technology. Okay, this is my presentation, and I like to say that, Thailand is not a high-tech country, and we're not inventing any technology, but we try our best to using available technology to support to reduce the global warming and help and go along with other countries for the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanchai. I have to say the last comment was quite modest for what he has shown, where EGAT is today with all the advanced application technologies. So now going to our final presenter, Mr. Sharat Usmani from KPMG Singapore. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, ADB, for inviting KPMG for this important conference. What I thought I'll do is probably I'll just have three parts to my presentation. I'll talk about a little bit of imperative of decarbonization and energy transition, which I guess we have been hearing for the last 3 days. And then we'll talk about some of the initiatives that are happening on our energy transition in the region. And then how do we facilitate decarbonization? A couple of ideas I wanted to share, and we can, of course, discuss in detail during the presentation. So I think the imperatives are very clear, isn't it? We know that a fair bit of emission happens in Southeast Asia because usually coal-dependent economies here. There are fairly strong commitment under the NDCs by various countries, although we must acknowledge that not all the emissions are necessarily covered under the national net zero commitments. We did a survey and we realized that, as expected, 75% of the consumers do want action to be taken on climate change. And of course, we look at various statistics on renewable energy from previous presentations as well. But broadly, 23% of the installed capacity in the region is renewable energy, and it can only go up if we can strengthen the grid infrastructure, as was highlighted as well. When we look at what happened at COP28, there were a number of initiatives which were offered. Some of them are consistent with the NDC declaration, some are additional to that. A number of things will have to fall in place for us to achieve our net zero ambitions as well as NDC goals. But a few I wanted to highlight, and of course the others we can discuss during the panel. One is the renewable energy efficacy. And this is where it's not only about installing new renewable energy capacity, but also how to ensure that demand side measures like energy efficiency are factored in extremely well. And supporting those initiatives for energy efficiency across industries will be fundamental as we decarbonize the sector. Carbon capture and storage, there was a lot of discussion during the last couple of days, and I think it's important that while this technology is still emerging, that is still on the agenda and is mainstreamed in coming years, which will be important, and hence the role of ADB in this regard will be quite fundamental. I think all the other initiatives we can talk about it, but the reason I wanted to highlight is it's not only about energy. It's about food, agriculture. It's about looking at the broader HFCs or air conditioning that happens. All those things have to be factored in when we look at the broader energy transition. So what are the examples of energy transition in Southeast Asia? I think this energy transition mechanism of ADB has been discussed quite extensively, and KPMG is advisor to ADB for this ASEAN-wide initiative to not only do the pilot for early retirement of coal plants, but also to set up a funding vehicle that will potentially fast track the retirement through blended financing is important. It was launched at COP26. It was an extremely worthwhile initiative. I think hopefully the proof of concept in terms of the first pilot should happen very soon. Ahead of COP29, we are hoping to close the Cirebon transaction in Indonesia. And that will be extremely important first step to get more of such things happen systematically in the region. In that regard, I think the critical part of getting the philanthropic organizations, government, and multilaterals to come together to set up the fund that will drive this momentum would be very critical. The second example I wanted to highlight again is this is one of the biggest renewable energy procurement program. Of course, not as big as Vietnam, but Indonesia has launched a 1 gigawatt program on a long-term PPA basis through a joint venture with private sector. The reason I thought is interesting is it's not only the biggest in Indonesia, but as different from other procurement processes. In this procurement, we have actually decided to pre-fund the debt financing as part of the RFP itself. So it's a staple debt financing provided, and it achieves two objectives, right? First is, of course, it ensures that the project is bankable. So if banks have pre-approved and give a committed term sheet as part of the RFP, that gives a comfort to the bidders that indeed this is a very bankable project. And ADB happens to be one of the 4 lenders we have got on board for this project. But the second important thing it achieves is also gives a very fine pricing, because a lot of lenders are comfortable that these are serious projects, it's going to happen, a very structured, transparent process is being run. So it achieves both the objectives of bankability as well as getting very fine pricing for the projects. I also wanted to touch upon transport sector, and we recently completed a project in Malaysia where we're looking at e-buses, the public transport electrification, which is again going to be a very, very important initiative. Now there's some impediments, hurdles for adoption of electric vehicle, right? The range anxiety and the charging stations. But effectively over the next few years, we need to look at how the penetration of electric vehicles is mainstreamed. And the expectation is we should probably go up to 60% by 2030. Singapore has announced close to 30,000 charging stations to be put in a small little island city-state. I think more and more countries have to start moving towards that. But that impact of that on grid and time of the day power prices is something which has to be comprehended. And this is where the convergence between transport and energy sector happens. And this is something which we'll have to look at it very closely. So how do we facilitate decarbonization? There are a few initiatives we have been doing. One of the thoughts is how do we come up with a playbook by sector to assist in decarbonization? Now, it's not only the energy sector, but real estate sector is also very, very big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And in Singapore, we recently did a project with the Institute of Higher Learning. And effectively, we came up with a playbook to say that these are the things that you got to do in the short term, medium term, and long term. And if you can give a roadmap to organizations, companies, or sectors, it is that much more effective to implement it. And if you can share successful case studies of implementing those projects, that's very powerful. So we believe that we should do this kind of playbooks, and we did it for real estate sector as well, where actually we identified specific initiatives that built environment sector can do to drive the decarbonization journey. So while the long-term targets are clear, I think what to do in the next 12, 36 months is not necessarily very clear to a lot of players. And this is where I believe that the playbooks can help them learn from each other, replicate successful examples as well. The last thing I wanted to share was there's a need for a matching platform. What I mean by that is how do you match technology, projects, and financing? There are a number of projects which are there in the market which don't necessarily have access to financing or technology, maybe because they're small or don't have the sophistication to approach the right institutions. I think with the advent of technology, if we can create a digital platform or an exchange where we can list our projects, list the financing tools, as well as list the technology, it will be a very powerful medium to match projects and get them funded. And this is a pilot we are running in Singapore, where we are actually setting a decarbonization marketplace, where everybody who has a project can come and list the project, and financiers can list the instruments that they have for financing of decarbonization projects, and the tool can do the matchmaking in that respect. We're hoping that this tool can further be taken to the ASEAN level and potentially the broader Asia level, so it becomes a project exchange for decarbonization kind of initiatives. So those are the broad initiatives that we are doing, and I'm happy to discuss it during our panel. But before that, I wanted to highlight 6 key success factors according to us for energy transition in ASEAN. I think in our initiative to drive environment safeguards and decarbonization, we should not forget the social aspect of it, and that's where the just and equitable comes in. That's what we have put number 1, because we believe that societies have to be accommodated on their concerns before we can drive this agenda successfully. I think the playbooks that we talked about, replicable pathways are important. I don't think we need to, every country, every sector needs to reinvent the wheel. We need to come up with replicable plug and play solutions that can be implemented effectively. I think over the last 3 days, we've talked a lot on regulatory and policy. That is very, very important. Consistency and coherence on that across countries would be very powerful. Of course, partnerships and collaborations cannot be undermined. There will be fairly strong need to have public, private, civil societies to work together to drive this momentum. I think institutions like Asian Development Bank are leading the charge on innovative financing, and we believe that we should continue to have that. More of blended financing, philanthropic capital should be attracted to the sector with proper mechanisms. And finally, I think technology will have to play a very, very important role. Currently, we are not in a stage where some of the marginal technologies can help us reach where we want to go. So technology will have to continue to be implemented. So those are the big 6 themes I thought we should keep in mind as we chart the journey for decarbonization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharad. Sharad, if you could please go ahead and stay and take a seat at the panel. We'll move to the panel discussion. So if I could ask the panelists to go up, and including Keiju from ADB's Sovereign Energy team. Thank you. And we're right on time. This is how good our panelists are. So we'll go ahead and open the floor for any questions you may have from the discussions we've had so far, the presentations, insights from the panelists. If you have a question, and maybe raise a hand. If not, I have. Do I see some questions? Oh, okay. Then maybe I can start with some questions. And with my own people, if I may, because he didn't have a presentation. So if I could ask my director, Keiju, out of the trends and discussions we've had about Southeast Asia's energy transition, I think a question would be, where do you see ADB's role? Claire has discussed the private sector financing operation side of our intro, but I think where our focus should be, what ADB can do in this area. Maybe if I could ask Keiju to start the discussion on this.
All right, thank you very much. This is really an important and exciting time working in the energy sector. If we look back, till a couple of years ago, we've been really working on energy access, energy security. So the economy is growing very fast, and then to support this, many countries use thermal power to support industry. And then for us, from the development perspective, energy access has been quite important. So we'll be looking at increasing the electrification, working on the last mile, the connection. We still have to do that, but then Southeast Asia have achieved a lot, made a lot of progress on this. And now, 2023, 2024, we realize that we really need to look at, a shift towards energy transition. So our energy program in Indonesia, we got a large result-based lending, looking at the more of a electrification support and energy security support in the remote area of Indonesia. Now this year's focus, which Yuki is actually leading, is really looking at the energy transition. How can we, and then another colleague, is supporting on this, is how can we support the energy transition to promote the renewable energy connected to the grid? And so this is the change of our focus. This is one thing I want to highlight. Second things I want to highlight is that we went through a kind of a substantial organizational restructuring, and then trying to look at how can we deliver a more client-oriented, solution-oriented, product. And with this, we've started to focus not on just the upstream, the policy work. You used to call it more of a policy, reform part, and then we straightly work on the kind of a downstream loan, the financing preparation. But we realized that we need to have a bit more granular approach, and then now we have structured our approach with the focus on upstream, midstream to really look at After we work on a policy level and the strategy level with the government, working on the project scoping, and then we divided the team to really focus on downstream business on financing structuring, and then with this we work on public finance, and also some may go to the private sector finance, and we're better structured, more integrated to look at the opportunities through the upstream, midstream, downstream, from the policy to project scoping to the providing the right appropriate financing solution to it. So that's one example in the case of Indonesia. But I'll stop here. There are other countries as we work.
Thank you, Keiju. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please go ahead. Please quickly introduce yourself and ask your question.
Sure. Stephen Nash from Kungana Advisory. So interested to hear a bit more about perhaps some of the learnings that there are from individual countries in the region that can be shared. So we heard a bit about risk allocation in some of the contracts, and in particular in Vietnam, and some of the challenges around the PPA that's been used for a lot of the FIT projects there. And then in Indonesia, I guess Indonesia is an interesting example because there's maybe at an earlier stage in terms of number of megawatts built for renewable energy, but the PPA is arguably kind of, although it has its challenges, it's got less issues than maybe in Vietnam and maybe to some extent in the Philippines here as well. So I'm just interested to hear like where you see big opportunities, whether it's in the commercial sort of risk allocation challenges or maybe elsewhere in structuring some of these projects, what kind of key lessons can be taken from maybe one country that can be applied elsewhere as well.
Is that directed to someone specific in the panel, or?
To anybody really, but I guess we heard in particular around the Vietnam example, which would be perhaps interesting to explore more, but any other ideas as well.
Okay, maybe we can start with Claire on Vietnam a little bit, then ask maybe Shara to come in after.
Yeah, so about Vietnam, I think what was interesting when this PPA came out is that it didn't stop investors to actually go very quickly into Vietnam because the feed-in tariff was very high. So I think the risk allocation was not right in the PPA, but they could make a lot of money out of it. Then when they started approaching banks, they realized, oh, this PPA is not bankable. So only local banks were kind of ready to finance it, but with Vietnamese dong, and there is no long-term market for Vietnamese dong. They have no fixed rates. They have to swap it every 3 to 5 years. So they were stuck. So that's why we came about with this limited sponsor support to cover this specific risk in the PPA. I think now one of the other things that was great in that PPA is the USD indexation. If you don't have that, so now in the new PDP-8, they want to remove this, lower the tariff, and keep the same risk. So basically, it's very hard for investors now to go and finance this project or even to invest in Vietnam. So we are trying to relay that to EVN, to our sovereign colleagues, because I think foreign investors will be more wary to invest in the country if you don't get the benefits but only the risks. It will be challenging. So yeah, that's maybe what I can say about Vietnam.
Thank you.
If I can just quickly comment on Indonesia, because we're working quite closely with PLN. One of our advices, of course, is to not to reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, the PPP 101 of risk residing with the party which is investable to mitigate it is very, very important, isn't it? I think some of the fundamental things like, giving some coverage on Forex take-or-pay obligations, because renewable energy can only generate when let's say for solar, when the sun is up, and if you don't offtake, it's a problem. So some of the things that at least the PPAs in Indonesia have addressed is all the risk allocation is probably sitting at the right place, I would say. Things like land acquisition is always a challenge, and that's where the joint venture thing that I talked about with Indonesia Power is important. Approvals, clearances, if you can get it much more effectively, then the developer's time frame of investment in the project or development goes down quite a lot. And we believe that the more you optimize the development process for the incoming developer, the more efficient or finely priced the tariff would be. And we believe that unlike Vietnam, Indonesia has gone through the process of not FIT but more the bid-based tariff, and the fact that they're starting late actually might be working in their advantage, because the tariff expected in Indonesia is going to be much lower than what we potentially have seen in other countries in the region. Of course, there are certain local considerations, things like local content requirement, and that's going to become fundamental as the countries want to develop the national economies as well. That is fair, but what is the quantum of local content requirement and how ready is the industry is something has to be reflected on. And this is where I guess the government will have to be pragmatic when they put those things in the contract.
Thank you. As someone that work in Indonesia myself, I'd really love to see that progress there. Any other questions? No, please go ahead.
Question to Denny. My name is Herbert Lewis from Indonesia. Question is, you're talking about small modular reactor just 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago. Could you elaborate this kind of concept? As we are going to deplete, run out of baseload hydropower and geothermal, 2038, so 15 years move back to the 2024, we have to start thinking about this, nuclear fission reactor, 60, 100 megawatt small modular reactor. Could you tell us a little bit more how Philippines moving forward to this technology? Thank you.
Well, thanks for asking that question. In terms of at what stage we are into for that modular nuclear reactor, we're still in the pre-feasibility stage, such that we have yet to send our some of our engineers to the US to train. And although we're looking at a few megawatts in rating, and the location would be situated into near the load center, but not that relatively safe areas. So I cannot provide you much since we're still at the very early stage of study. Thank you.
Do any other panelists have insight or anything to share on the modular nuclear aspect? No.
Sorry, perhaps I just want to highlight that although a lot of countries, organizations, and companies may not necessarily be talking about nuclear as yet, but going forward, if you have to take the decarbonization pathway forward, we'll have to essentially start considering that. In fact, Singapore, for the first time, actually in this year's financial budget, actually highlighted SMR will be an important consideration for the country, and of course, subject to safety, security requirements. But that's something which may have to be a more of a regional initiative rather than a country-specific initiative. So if all countries can work together, that'll be very, very powerful.
Okay, thank you. It is a topic that comes up actually quite often in our conversation with governments and in Southeast Asia. But one area we're not quite well equipped as ADB to support, I think. That said, maybe we can move on to the next question, please. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sushant Karaga from JSAT. So I would like to ask for ADB, since you mentioned that ADB support also the in Vietnam's in curtailments for the solar project, and also like the projects that developed so far in the southern part of Vietnam. How ADB support that, I think could be. Can you give some example or like what the technical assistance that you support for the projects? Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, it's one of the headaches that we have been, having, and then in terms of actually making a progress on it. So we do have a, policy dialogue, and then when it comes to PPA, I think Ministry of Planning and Investments in Vietnam is, working on the framework, and then they have a very good, team to work on it, but then a very limited size. So they approach ADB on how can we make the PPA better, and then we not only ADB, but we work with broader development partners, working in the country, and then put some brains, what's the best practice for Vietnam, and then so we work with other multilateral, but also bilateral agencies, and then we provide the best, I think, a solution that would be good for Vietnam, PPA situation. Stakeholders surrounding this PPA is not just MPA. However, there are EVN, and then Ministry of Industry, and then they are also part of it too. And then it has to go through different political decision there as well. And then we've done that practice back in to review the PPA acts when they were renewing it back in, I think, 2020. They learned what's best available, or what's the best practice that could be available, but then somehow they were not able to take all the comments or the advice that we've provided. They came back again, I think the end of last year or this year, again to look at how can we look at the better direct PPA. We've also worked with them again, but again it's a difficult conversation that we have, because there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and then of course it's not easy to change just based on international or best practice to be incorporated in the country. So despite these difficulties, we continue our dialogue, and then make sure that there are solutions that could be better adopted in the country. As you can see, any countries, including Vietnam, it's not very easy to just say this is the the best solution just to adopt it, right? So the system there is quite complex right now, and hence what we do is to keep having a good dialogue, offering and being available for whenever advice is necessary, and then yeah, so this is how we are working at the policy level. Yeah, thank you.
There have been some discussions throughout how in ASEAN it's a developing economies, and there's also space for more policies to be created around these new technologies. I'm more interested specifically in energy storage technologies. What kind of policies do you think would really encourage the development of that sector, and how it could help the energy transition?
That would be to which panelists specifically?
Maybe Meralco might have a view as a utility of how they want to see ESS viewed and treated in the grid, and maybe some of the other policies from other countries that they see would be useful.
Maybe ask for your own quick intro.
Oh, I'm Joshua from Altor Partners.
Thank you. Maybe ask you, Danny. Storage policies on storage, like
battery energy storage policy. So in terms of regulatory support, actually we don't have yet that here in the Philippines, and we are very much, we would want to, in fact, we would support if there would be one, considering that we have seen the effects of renewable energy sources going into, well, in terms of timing, the variability, we have seen that we need to provide enough support to the grid during peak, during nighttime, actually. And we really do need to have the battery energy storage system in place right now to support actually the reliability of the grid. If you would notice, the past few days, wherein there were a number of um, red alerts issued. And if you would look at the amount of power needed or absent during nighttime, it's actually very big. And that's why we would need to have that in place right away, actually. Thank you.
Maybe if I could ask Mr. Umeda for, since it's
Well,
enabling policies on
well,
batteries.
I'm not saying specifically for a battery storage, but as a storage system, there are some options for the storage, electricity storage, and maybe one of the traditional storage is a pumped storage, and also fly oil can use as a electricity storage. But maybe transformation to hydrogen is also can use as electricity storage. So I think, well, combination of such technologies for storage is important. I think so.
Okay, sure. I thought.
The Southeast Asia, economies are quite diverse. So, one, case doesn't fit all. Like in the Philippines, is quite, privatized, compared with other countries where utilities are they're responsible for, the public sector. State-owned enterprises are responsible for, the grid management. So it's quite diverse. But what I see in the region is that there is an interest for renewable energy, solar PV, intermittent and variable energy coming in. 3%, 5% of the grid, capacity coming in, generation and produce into the grid. 10%, 20%, we haven't been there, that territory. And then there's a needs to look at the solar PV, IPP coming in together with a battery. So there's a more interest in requiring the battery, to be part of the solar PV solution, just for the output control. At the same time, many public utilities are starting a pilot grid-connected, BESS at the industrial scale, but still, on a preliminary basis. I think once they are used to it, how it works, they understand, they will use the battery more for a peak shift. And that's when you have a more variable intermittent renewable energy coming into the grid. At the same time, so these are more of dealing with the more short-term solution, because batteries are not cheap. Many countries at the same time, including the Philippines, looking at a more long-term solution for the storage, and this is where the pumped storage comes in. It takes a long lead time to prepare and construct, and overall this is much cheaper, more sustainable solution. So as Umeda-san says, it's more of a combination, but there's a more of a short-term needs and then long-term approach to it. And then it's a combination of the storage system that is required, especially if we want to go more than 50, 70% of renewable energy in the grid system.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for one more question. Oh, you had your hand up first. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ronel from PwC. My question is for Claire. You said earlier that Vietnam has achieved earlier its target timeline to increase its RE capacity share. Can you elaborate further on how Vietnam managed and accommodated the increase in capacity on its grid? And what policy or technology may be the main driver for this?
Yeah, so that was back in 2022 that they achieved their objective very fast. But since then, there's been a lot of challenges. As you see, the grid has been overloaded. They don't have enough transmission lines, so they are working to build these new transmission lines for projects. And now there are also, a lot of developers are also looking into battery energy storage. And they are also doing a shift from coal to gas in some areas. So because they still need some stable input into the grid until they can have enough, I would say, battery storage project. So I think that's, right now, we see that there is a policy shift and they have these quotas per region because they have been thinking about most of the projects were concentrated in the southern part of Vietnam. That's where the grid was the most congested. But if you look at central Vietnam or northern part of Vietnam, it was a bit better. So they want to have a bit more uniformity around the country. So that's why there is this planning per provinces. They have allocated per type of project, so wind, solar, biomass. Each type of project will have a specific quota per region, and then the sponsor will have to kind of propose their project, and once the quota is filled, they will not accept new projects. So this is a way to better plan the resources, because I think what happened back then is they issued their regulation. They didn't expect so much demand into so many players to enter into this market so quickly. So there were, and because the tariff was so high, it was so attractive. So everybody wanted to rush in, and it wasn't unplanned, but it's just like a little bit uncontrolled, I would say, and that's why the grid got a lot of issues, and they had to curtail a lot of projects. Also, some projects couldn't reach, so to meet the tariff, to get this tariff of 9.35 cents, they had to reach commercial operation date by a certain deadline. It was very rushed. A lot of projects did not achieve that. And now you have a lot of stranded projects who are waiting for a new tariff and who have been bankrupt because they're not generating power, they're not getting any cash flow. So you have all these issues to solve. One way to resolve this, and they're coming up with what we call, and I know we are running out of time, but they're coming with this DPPA. So it's utility scale projects with private PPA, basically with, I don't know, Microsoft or people who want green energy, and they can basically discuss a term directly with a sponsor of these projects. With this, they won't have to go through the grid, most likely, or we don't really know how it's going to work. Maybe they're going to go through the grid, but then it's going to get balanced out somehow. And most of these projects, what I heard from sponsors, are going to come with a battery storage. Because, you know, Microsoft, if they have a 200 megawatt PPA with a sponsor, they're going to need the electricity at nighttime as well for their aircon or whatever. So I think that's a way to go around this issue that the grid is facing.
Maybe last question.
Okay, I'm Kittibun, NSDC Thailand, from a part of Thai government. So I would like to ask that what Mr. Thanachai has mentioned about the technology. So in your point of view, do you think like how the ASEAN communities can create their own technology, because we are technology dependent to other regions? So maybe I direct this question to Umeda-san and Osawa-san, who is from Japan and has like a long establishment of the technology development in the country. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll request Mr. Ozawa to respond to this.
Okay, question is about
how the ASEAN countries can develop the technology, much like what Mr. Tanachai said, very modestly, as I said, the no new technologies developed here, but I also didn't quite believe it. But I think this goes to your concept of co-creation there. So.
Okay. In my opinion, the best way to proceed that idea is co-creation between ASEAN and Japan. For the past 10 to 20 years, Japanese companies, including we Kawasaki Heavy Industries, conducting many kinds of R&D. But the thing right here is modification and localization to each ASEAN countries. As I mentioned in my presentation, each ASEAN country has its own big diversity. And without modification of Japanese technology, it is very difficult to provide our technology to each country. And to solve this kind of challenges, I trust that working with country to country is the best way. So this is my idea.
Technology transfer is a decision of each company, so government cannot say about the technology transfer. But as I said in my presentation, under the framework of the ASEC, more than 350 cooperative projects with Japanese company and ASEAN companies proceeding. So through such projects, I hope ASEAN company also develop their own technologies.
Thank you very much. And we're actually our time is actually up for this session now. And so that was the last question. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, all the panelists, for their contribution. Like in Shara's presentation, I think Asia Clean Energy Forum is also another type of marketplace where different types of expertise and people can come and share their expertise, much like our panelists did today. So please do use this opportunity to meet the panelists after this session if you have more questions, which I'm sure you do. And this is really our, I think, at the heart of the concept of this Asia Clean Energy Forum. So may I request another round of applause for the panelists for joining us today and sharing their experts. And thank you very much, and this concludes this session. Thank you.